This is the Authentic Change Podcast, and I am Mike Horne. Authenticity reflects what we want from each other and our organizations: open communication, trust, community, fun, and opportunity. I want to help you to do your best in your personal and professional relationships. This podcast delivers expertise, insights, and approaches on authentic leadership, to live your purpose, to lead from your values, to establish connected relationships, to steward people and culture change, to build and sustain prosperity, and to open doors and possibilities. This podcast will assist you in paving the way forward to personal, team, and organizational prosperity. Welcome to another edition of the Authentic Change Podcast. I'm so delighted today to have in the studio as a guest, Scott Spann. He is a people strategist, leadership coach, change and transformation consultant, and CEO of Tolero Solutions. More about that later. His work is focused on people. Scott believes that people are the greatest asset to any organization and that happy employees make for happy customers. Through coaching, consulting, and training, he supports leaders, teams, and individuals to survive and thrive through personal and professional change and transition. He assists clients to create people-focused cultures and a great employee experience. His coaching work focuses on increasing self-awareness, identifying patterns and ways to shift perception and change behaviors to overcome obstacles and accelerate performance. Scott brings his empathetic, direct, authentic style and sense of humor to his work. He has a passion for assisting clients to engage talent, customers, and guide success in organizations. He enjoys working with others and helping people to thrive. I'm going to let Scott say a little bit more about himself, but I know that he keeps it real as a coach. He brings levity and humor to difficult situations, and we'll hear some of that today as we speak with Scott. He's an author on various topics of leadership and change and transition. He has a master's in organization development from American University and the NTL Institute. He's a certified Scrum Master and has certifications in various strategy, change, team dynamics, and behavioral assessment tools. He holds a government security clearance. Scott is also a member of the International Coaching Federation. He's a dog lover, Caribbean junkie, artist, quote addict, and implementer of organizational improvements. He resides outside of the District of Columbia, where I once lived, Scott. And I'm so delighted to have you here. What an impressive portfolio, background, resume, a way of introducing. Yes. So Scott, just bring that to life.
Yeah, sure. And
welcome.
Thank you, Mike. And I'm happy to be here too, and I appreciate you having me on the show. I know we have some synergies around our approach to change as well, so I look forward to talking about some of that as well today. You hit on most of the biggies, as you said. The one piece I would like to add too is the newly published book as well, which I have contributed to. And of course, the topic is apropos for today too, as it's on authenticity. The title of the book is The Successful Spirit. It can be found on Amazon. And the book overall is about focus, drive, and determination. But it's also about balance, mindfulness, and common sense ways to take control of your life. So a lot of good info to help you reach your goals and excel at your highest level in there as well.
How did you come to write that, Scott? What are the themes of what you've written?
Sure. So this was actually an interesting collaboration that I was invited to join by a colleague of mine. And the topic is what interested the publisher. And authenticity, particularly around change, has been something I've been I'd say working on from a manuscript perspective for some time, but just never had the real desire to go through that process. And Mike, you're familiar with that process. I'm sure you know what that could be like. So when I was
It's
invited
my
to
next book, Authentic Change. I think it'll be out, available in the marketplace in about 13 months.
There you go. I'm looking forward to that. So with that, when I was asked to do this, I said, sure, it's a great opportunity to share some of the material that I already had. And like you had said, keep it real has been one of the things that clients have said to me in the past when describing my style, which also, aligns with my interest in authenticity. And after doing change work for a lot of years, I have found too that the most successful changes, whether personal or organizational for that matter, come from an authentic perspective, right? So if you look at it from the organizational lens, for example, I have found that the change leaders that I have worked with that have been most successful in the long term have been the ones that practiced authentic leadership, the ones that, acknowledged what it is that they don't know, were willing to learn what it is they didn't know and close those gaps to help be successful, maintain transparent communication, which also helped, of course, to build the trusted relationships necessary for change as well. So that level of authenticity that I've seen exhibited, has led to some of the most successful projects. Whereas on the flip side, they've been a little more bumpy when that hasn't been part of the plan.
And for me, I would wonder or imagine, Scott, what is underneath that? Is it trust? I mean, that's where I would logically head.
Yeah, I mean, trust is a big piece of it. I'm a fan of Brene Brown's work in the space of authenticity. And I also think, too, vulnerability, or more so a lack thereof, is also a component of that as well. And that contributes directly to trust, going back to the authenticity piece, too. So I would agree with that.
Sometimes I've often said that you can't trust everyone about everything in organizations. Totally. So it's important to cultivate trust in purpose, in mission, in vision. And if you can do that, then you can really encourage diverse talent around you, because you understand that there are many ways, but if we're all headed on the same path in the same direction, there's often a lot of joy in those different approaches.
Oh, yes. I mean, I would agree with the purpose and the passion, right? So if people are aligned on purpose and that purpose also aligns with their passion, then that definitely shines through.
Yeah, facts are strange things. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, go ahead.
You gave me this thought that facts are strange things. They're even stranger these days. That reasonable people have different views about different situations, and I think that's been a common experience in organizations, right? I don't know why some of the reasons why you were attracted to organization development, but certainly I thought organizations were paragons of virtue and teamwork. And, I learned that that's not often true.
Then we get into them, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that what I have to do with these differences or these differences in facts, and differences can happen, facts, values, processes, methods, goals. Sure. But these differences, these opposites, you have to encourage people to look up, right, to what's in common for them. Is it a customer? Is it a relationship? So important that you pointed that out. And I just want to go back to what you described earlier about keeping it real, that people have often described it as you keeping it real. That is part of the way that we describe integrity, right? I mean, the genuine article, the real deal, the real thing. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that in your work.
Sure. And I think, I do want to come back to your piece briefly about, the purpose, because what you just said triggered something for me, which is alignment, right? So I think it's important that the alignment exists as well, between the people themselves and the purpose of the organization and their own passion. And I think that, I've seen too, that the leaders that can communicate the purpose in the most clear and coherent fashion to their people in a way that gets them energized and engaged and gets them on board with supporting the purpose, then the more successful the organization. So that just triggered that thought for me. So I just wanted to circle back on that piece.
And it takes us right back to trust, maybe, and where you were headed with the ideas around trust in relationships and teams.
Yeah, and that's to your earlier question. That that is a big piece as well. The trust piece around the whole real deal and keeping it real piece, and trust and integrity too. Of course, very tightly integrated as well. I personally have a hard time finding anyone off the top of my head, anyway, who I can say has high integrity, but is a non-trusted individual. If you ask people that work for them, right? You say to people, that work for this person, let's say, do you trust them? No. Well, you ask them, do you feel they have integrity? It's usually also no. So those two things I have seen and have heard, tightly integrated as well.
Scott, that's such a rich description, that relationship between integrity and trust. And what do you think, or what have you observed that chips away at a person's integrity? Trust, I might say, it shows up in at least two ways: that it's either freely given or people have to earn it. Mm-hmm. Where does it stand with integrity? Because you're right. I mean, you wouldn't often hear a person self-describe as, I'm a person of integrity.
Right. And if they do, people kind of look at them and go, really? Who told you that? But I think what chips away, is complete incongruence. And I've seen it happen on multiple client engagements, right? I mean, it's the say does not equal the do. And I will refrain from my soapbox on that. But, I often tell client leaders that, look, you have got to be consistent. You have got to be transparent. You have got to be clear and, of course, authentic, as well, not just in your communications, but in your interactions and your way of being, because your people will be able to see right through the BS, right? So if you're putting on this facade, but then behind your closed office door, it's, you're a completely different person, or vice versa, for that matter. People will notice that, and they will pick up on that, and they will see that you are not a person of high integrity because you are incongruent, and that will negatively impact their ability to trust you.
Right. And I that's a wonderful illustration of how inextricably linked these concepts are. Integrity being the genuine article of whole cloth, something that hangs together well, and authenticity being congruence between words and actions, and better yet, words, actions, and thoughts. So that really is in many ways is a loop. And yet we know that integrity is tested throughout life. When you're a preteen and through your teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. I mean, throughout life, throughout the kinds of decisions that you make in organizations. But it makes authenticity more the tempo of life, as opposed to the staccato points or the musical notes that happen relative to integrity.
And it's an interesting analogy as well. Yeah, and I could totally see that. And it's funny to me because, you will hear people say, I'm living my authentic life, or I am my authentic self. But you very rarely hear a person say, I have high integrity, as you were mentioning before. I am full of integrity. But they are, like you had just said, and I agree with that, they are tightly integrated. But it's just interesting to me, people will tout one, but they don't realize that there's another one that's behind it, helping to build that up.
Are integrity and authenticity different sides of the same coin, just as leadership and culture are? Do you think maybe?
Maybe, perhaps. And I think some of that might be, situational to an extent as well, depending on a person's experiences and how they define them. But I could see that. I can see that.
Right. So I also think I've been contemplating, ruminating on authentic leadership. I think it's difficult to disagree that we ought to bring more of who we are to what we do. I'm sure someone could make an argument on that, but
depends who you are.
yeah, exactly. Right. In my experience, most people, want to make a contribution. They want to be, everyone deserves to be loved. And, it's our job to figure out how to let that talent shine.
Valued, heard, and appreciated, as I would say.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So if there's probably widespread agreement with that, what's the problem we're trying to solve, do you think? in organizations? Is it one of trust? Is it one of?
And from my perspective, there's multiple.
Uh-huh.
As we know, organizations like snowflakes, the old adage goes, right? So, depending on the culture and the leadership, they're not all the same. So there would be differences there as well. But I definitely think that authenticity within organizations these days has somewhat become a little misconstrued as well, because authenticity has become, a buzzword all over social media now,
Sure.
outside the context that, you and I are discussing it. And it kind of gives people, and at a broader spectrum, organizations sometimes, license to act like jerks.
Right.
And one of the things I say in my book is, being authentic is not licensed to be a jerk.
Right.
So I think there's a self-awareness component that comes with being authentic. And the first part of that is to identify what authenticity means to you as an individual before you can even see it,
Right.
at the level. And then how do you bring that forward so that you can actually live it?
Right. And the problem is not diagnoses, like let's figure out, what's getting in the way of this transition or this challenge or this holding back on a particular strength. I mean, so the problem is not in the diagnosis, and it's not in the solution of authentic leadership, or however we might frame that, despite how attracted or attached we are to that, as it arises from a set of humanistic values. Is the challenge then that we're working on is what you described earlier, is creating alignment so that you can flow better.
Life is about alignment, right?
Right.
In general. So I would totally agree with that. First is the identification piece, but yes, then the alignment piece. Because if we look at it from an individual perspective, a human perspective, once we as people identify what authenticity means to us and we begin to access that authenticity, then we have to figure out, okay, well, if we're looking at a workplace, an organization, what type of organization best aligns with that for us?
Right.
How can we add the most value as our authentic selves if we are part of an organization where that alignment does not exist?
Mm-hmm.
So
in a way, what I say about congruency is that congruent people are generally happy people, and the research is clear that we enjoy working with happy people, and I think that's generally a really good thing, to have this congruence that creates this happiness. It's not the kind of happiness that comes with discrete events in life, children, new partners, but comes with a sustained sense that my words, actions, and thoughts align. So, the result, the outcome is happiness, which, builds better relationships. I studied for a while with Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy, the Immunity to Change model for quite some time. And I recall Bob saying once that the purpose of coaching was to eliminate some suffering. And I've come to reframe that, for myself, that I think it's really about promoting happiness. And, but I wonder how you find that in your work, Scott.
Sure. I mean, but there's the other definition of coaching too, which is, maximizing potential or maximizing an individual's ability to increase their own potential. But I would agree from the happiness perspective, that congruence and happiness, no pun intended, to the prior part of our conversation, are aligned.
Right.
But yes, I mean, the happier an individual is with their life and their work and what's going on, usually does equate to congruency in what I have found. It's interesting in some of the coaching work that I do, separate from some of the change and transformation consulting work, though, because sometimes with some clients, getting to what congruence looks like and identifying steps that they can take to find a quote congruent match after they identify what congruence looks like is the harder part.
Right. And just as we wrap up, I mean, what's an entree? What's one flight path, one glide way that you would help a client that you're coaching in a new relationship, how would you help him or her or them enter that pathway?
Congruence or authenticity?
Congruence.
Congruence. Yeah, I mean, there's some diagnostics that I'll do with them, but overall, it's exploring their values, helping them to identify what their values are. Often that gets into how their values were shaped, so certain life experiences as well. And then they realize, wait, I didn't like that life experience. I really like that one. Why am I doing that? Right. So the values piece is huge for folks. And often it's something we lose track of as we get older, as we get further in our careers as well. We kind of get into autopilot. And some of the folks I coach have been in that mode for quite some time, and they kind of forgot themselves a little bit. Right.
And such a great place to end is where we start so much of this authentic leadership work, which is at the point of humanistic values, that we all deserve to be loved, that there's respect for the individual, there's dignity in everything that we, by bringing diverse ideas and people around us, we grow inclusion. So it begins with that. Scott, if people wanted to engage with you, connect with you, how would they do that? What are the ways to do that?
Sure. The easiest way is via my website, which is tolerosolutions.com, TOLERO solutions, all one word. And plenty of ways to contact me there, as well as all the social channels are also on the website. But folks are also free to reach out directly if they'd like via LinkedIn or any of the other social channels as well.
Scott, it's been such a joy having you on the Authentic Change podcast. And I gained so much from your illustrations, your wisdom, your sagacity on
There's
the topics.
Thank you for that one.
On linking the concepts of being genuine in our approaches and fostering congruence. Thank you so much to everyone, to all the listeners. Thank you so much. Love your likes on the podcast. And until the next episode, stay well. Thank you. Thanks for listening. And I hope you'll subscribe today and tell a friend about our show. If you're looking for hands-on help to increase your success through authentic change, or have a question you'd like to hear me answer here, please email me at mike@mike-horne.com.